right, and we are here in the feature match area. Joseph Bernal on your left playing 5-color Creativity, one of the dominant decks of Modern. And then we have Jack Erdahl on the right here on the play, playing the Rakdos Scam deck that we saw in round number 1, a deck you're a big fan of, Dom. And it looks like we were shocking a Blood Crypt, and we're going to be casting a Grief Evoked, getting rid of one of our Undying effects. Looks like Bernal's laying the hand out here saying no responses. And we have a Spell Pierce, a Fable the Mirror Breaker, and then a Leyline Binding along with 3 lands for Bernal.
Yeah, easy to poke a hole in this hand. You can take the Binding that would remove the Grief, can take the Fable that would tie the room together, improve the draw, maybe dig towards the namesake Creativity that lets the deck go off. So assuming Jack has the Fainteth effect, and I untap Blood Crypt strongly suggests that he does, 2 of these cards are going to disappear, assuming it's going to be the Binding and the Fable.
Yeah, it looks to be like he's touching the Binding, and then he did just hurt an Undying Evil, I believe, to the Grief. So probably a good chance there's another one in hand. And Bernal, experienced player on our circuit, and Magic knows that for sure, as we do see the Undying effect here come in. This is going to put a +1/+1 counter on the Grief, and it looks like, yeah, we were double checking sort of everything, and it looks like we're taking the Fable. Makes a lot of sense, just the one card that can sort of maybe bail us out of this double Grief.
Yeah, this matchup is very swingy. One thing about the Creativity deck is you have a lot of different things, but not that much redundancy on those things. So you have your Creativities and the Transmogrifies, but only 4 to 6 copies of those. You've got your Leyline Bindings, got your removal, but not a ton of removal. You've got Fable, but they only let you play 4 Fable, thankfully. So if you have this double Grief start, you can often poke a hole in the hand, deprive them of access to one type of effect, and then push that angle very hard.
As we do see a fetch of, I believe, Xander's Lounge here. We have mounted to basically all of the lands in Bernal's deck are mountains to enable the Dwarven Mine. And we get an Archon Creativity Exile. That's one way for Jack to answer the Archons. You just sort of hit them all off Ragavan. X's 4 on Creativity is no longer a play for Bernal. He's going to keep that one in mind.
Oh, well, sometimes the Scam deck gets to play Doughty Voidwalker and then get Archon exiled and just cast it itself. They get to be the Archon deck now. Not in the cards just yet, but something to keep in mind maybe for the other games.
Yeah, Bernal plays a Jetmir's Garden and passes the turn back to Jack. Triumphs. I love triumphs. They don't bother me at all. Dash a Ragavan.
We all love triumphs. And yeah, Ragavan joining the Grief, connecting for 6 here, unless... yeah, barring any removal spells. So Bernal already down to 7. We're going to get another card, exile, just a Bloodstained Mire, so not going to get anything further out of that. 2 treasure tokens there from Jack. Maybe you can put those to good use double spelling this turn.
Yeah, see, Jack is considering doing something.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, Dauthi Voidwalker on the board. That's going to really add to this clock, and that's lethal on the next turn if unanswered, right?
It sure is. That's 7 power right there, and then Ragavan can make up the difference.
Bernal's drawn for turn. We know he has Spell Pierce and a couple lands in hand for sure, but did get 2 new draw steps. A lot of cards that, this deck has. Things like Teferi Time Raveler could be used to unsummon the Grief and buy you a turn. We're have to see what Bernal is going to choose to do here, as he is going to fetch and exile that card with a little dice on it for the Dauthi Voidwalker. Bernal is down to 6, though. Already, this is so much quicker than our other rounds and so much quicker than the last Scam deck. Last time we saw the Scam deck kind of get broken up in those early turns, but this shows why it can be so strong early. As Bernal does play the Teferi Time Raveler, it looks to be unsummoning the Grief from the board.
Yeah, so Grief goes back, but Bernal down to 6 from the fetch land. Voidwalker plus Ragavan, that's 5. So that would get Joseph down to 1, shutting off any future fetch lands, and then also... well, okay, that's... why deal 5 when you can deal 6? So very quick game 1. Very convincing victory going to Jack Erdahl there. So I guess we can already hear... kind of refreshing after those long, drawn-out control games. Within 3 or 4 minutes here, we can take a look at sideboards and come back to the booth.
Yeah, Jack there just showing, Bolt plus still good enough. Bolt plus creatures, you can kill your opponent, and sort of showed how powerful this game can be. In round 1, we saw we were scamming our opponent, but we still played this long drawn out game, but we played a real game, and we were able to do that despite this. Jack's like, listen, here's what the deck can really do. Here's how it can line up so well. Let's actually jump on over to the sideboard and see sort of what Jack or Bernal is packing for this matchup and see how they might sideboard for together. Let's start with Bernal here. Bernal's sideboard is 3 Flusterstorms, 3 Nature's Claim, 3 Leyline of Sanctity, an Alpine Moon, a Veil of Summer, a Celestial Purge, a Wear Tear, a Boseiju Who Endures, and the basic Plains Dom, what do you like if you're Bernal?
So I think Bernal came with this matchup in mind. Leyline Sanctity could come in as an answer to Grief and Thoughtseize, potentially stuff like Necromancer effects as well. And then we have a smattering of good one-offs. So the Veil of Summer is nice, the Wear Tear, and then lots of different forms of Boseiju, of Blood Moon insurance. We have the Boseiju, we have the Celestial Purge, we have the basic planes that lets you cast the Purge or the Binding and so on, even under Blood Moon. So I imagine a lot of that stuff is coming in, and maybe we're going to lose stuff like the Spell Pierces, which are pretty hit or miss. Maybe these Remands keep the core of the deck intact.
Yeah, those sort of cards can be really good against a lot of the counterspell heavy decks in the field, but this deck's got a lot of creatures and a lot of cheap spells you're not even going to be able to spell pierce. You don't need to protect your combo in that sort of way. Let's see what Jack's doing for his game plan. And it looks like Jack's sideboard is going to have 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Hidetsu Consumes All, 2 Engineer Explosive, 2 Unlicensed Hearts, 2 Orval the All Formed, 2 Obnixilis the Adversary, a Collective Brutality, a Brotherhood's End, and a Fatal Push. What do you like from Jack here?
Well, you see that touch of blue in the sideboard there for Orval the Allform. We're not casting that thing. We are discarding it to the opponent's Archon of Cruelty trigger, copying that Archon, throwing that right back at them, making it much harder to go off with creativity. And sometimes you see creativity decks with some other creature in the sideboard, something like an Emrakul, an Iona, an Atraxa, primarily with Orval in mind, because that card is so hard to beat otherwise. Nothing like that for Joe. So if Joe goes for a creativity, we may get a Rude Awakening. And Orval, because it's effectively free in that context, you can play it here in your Rakdos deck, you can play it anywhere. Not actually that common as a sideboard card in the Scam deck. And so I don't know if, Orval is a card that is always on your radar. Don't know if it will be in this matchup. So we might see that really take the game by surprise. Other than that, I think you can make a case for Engineered Explosives, just sweeping up tokens at instant speed. It's a little inefficient at doing that, and you have to expose it in advance, so not actually that good there. So I imagine we'll keep the deck mostly the same, but those Orvals, those are coming in, and we are hoping to draw those.
All right, Dom, you're the scam expert. I'm the dreamer. Here's my dream I'm pitching you. Surgical Extraction, we hit the Archon, we take it. We hit the creativities, we take it. Is it good enough? Is it finally a fair matchup where I can bring in Surgical, or is it just too much of a scam?
I mean, the whole deck is a scam, right? I don't hate Surgical. I think you can bring those in. And yeah, sometimes it's going to be hit or miss, right? Sometimes it does nothing. You're going to toss that away to a Grief or to a Fable or something. Other times, it is going to be a really high impact card. So yeah, I actually do like the idea of bringing those in, hoping to spike. If you don't, could probably find a use for the card anyway.
Nice, I like it. I really like this deck, Dom. I'm not gonna lie. I really enjoyed your all's episode of Dominator Judgment talking about this deck. If you want to listen more about this deck, that's a free podcast you can listen to. They went all over this deck. Great episode. This deck is really exciting to see, and I think it's the real deal. I don't know. I think we mentioned this earlier in the day. I think players just give it a bad rap for having the scam name. So I'm really excited to see how it lines up against one of our strongest players on the tour, Joseph Bernal here, an all-star of the NRG series since the beginning, and someone who's an all-star in Magic, someone you definitely going to know if you've gone to these events, in any event, really.
Yeah, a mainstay of the Midwest Magic scene, a lot of success on the SCG circuit, the GP circuit back in the day, and then here on the NRG series as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bernal quietly one of the sickos, someone very strong to play against, very nice, gets the job done. As we are going to see a Marsh Flats for Jack here after Joseph just played the Scalding Tarn and pass. Pretty common for the creativity deck to sort of not do much, kind of similar to the Rhinos decks in the first turn or so, and then sort of start catching up from there.
Yeah, the creativity deck is a little clunky. You don't have a ton of cards you can play in the early turns. And part of that is just the mana base, right? You have a bunch of Dwarven Mines and a bunch of Triomes to fix your colors while still having mountains to set up your Dwarven Mines. And so, yeah, you're not double spelling or even single spelling in the early turns as often as some of these other decks.
As we do see the Thoughtseize here from Jack, he's going to try and poke a hole in Joseph's hand. Bernal's fetching. This could be the Veil of Summer.
The one Veil. We'll see what color this landed. That's a Stomping Ground. There it is.
It's untapped. I believe they call this Cryptic Command in the business, Dom.
And Jack knows exactly what this means. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there it is.
Jack's like, dang, Bernal must have a bunch of these. He came prepared for me. Little does Jack know, the fun of goes the distance sometimes.
And then you go back and you look at Joe's deck list afterwards, and you're like, God damn it, really? The one of.
Yeah, they're checking to see if Jack will actually lose the 2 life or not. I believe the spell gets countered
It does,
So
yeah.
we're fizzles. Yeah, so you don't actually lose the 2 life. So just a small thing to check out. Magic is very weird sometimes.
Yeah, small constellation there from Jack, but we would much rather pay the 2 and have that thing resolve.
I would pay 6, I think, that's where the line stops. Like 7 life, I don't know. 6 life, I'm in to get my Thoughtseize to resolve. Bernal tanking. It's very important with this deck because your mana base is very painful, and there's a fair number of tap lands. We do see Xander's Lounge played for the turn and passing here to sequence your lands correctly because your Dwarven Mines don't enter untapped unless you have the 3 mountains. Sometimes you play things like the Plains and, like I mentioned, the Shock. So you're going to see a little bit of tanking there in the early turn just to set up the next couple of turns. A very common play from the creativity players.
Yeah, we'll see what Jack has access to here. We see a Ragavan in the hand, potentially some other. Okay, Blood Crypt getting shocked. So is this Ragavan, or do we have a 2-drop lined up?
I'm a bit of a Raga fan. Let's see if we got a Ragavan to back it up. As it is Dauthi Voidwalker. Okay. Definitely a real body.
And Lightning Bolt for Bernal. So really keeping up with the early plays in the scam deck. And if Bernal has something like a Wrenn and Six or a Fable to follow up with here, can hope to cement that lead.
Yeah, as we do see Bernal here, sort of stabilizing the board, and this is we're getting really close to the turn, right? Indomitable Creativity is an X's 1. This is the only time you're going to see it happen here. So we are fetching the Plains. Going to respect the Blood Moon now. That means we're not going to be able to Creativity at least until turn 5, most likely without having something like Fable the Mirror Breaker. But we are going to be really strong against the card Blood Moon now. As Teferi Time Rover comes down and takes on up another way to answer Blood Moon if Jack's all in on that card.
Yeah, also shutting off any kind of scam shenanigans, no Feign Death, no Undying Mass, anything like that.
Yeah, Jack plays the Bloodstained Mire, tanks for a second, and looks like it's going to be a dashed Ragavan. Jack could hit something off Bernal's deck that can maybe do a little bit of work. Bernal does play 4 Lightning Bolts.
Or could maybe team up with a bolt to finish off the Teferi here. We'll see where it goes. All right, Bernal like marking his life total. Yeah. What are we going to flip? Yeah, there were some good hits. If Jack hits Wrenn and Six or something, that's a very different game.
Yeah, that's very true. Shock, fetch land, not exactly what Jack's looking for, but Jack does get the treasure for his trouble. Might be able to cast something like a Thoughtseize here now that he's sort of got a little information. We'll see exactly what he's going to do. He's going to pick it up and just hold on to his cards for now, set up for a later turn. Normally, you're under a lot of pressure on the turn 4 from Creativity. That's the turn they can sort of slam if you're not ready. But the Plains in play does make it so Bernal is going to be unable to get the Dwarven Mine token off that card and do the Creativity. So got a little bit more time here for Jack and playing with it accordingly.
Yeah, so Jack didn't start fast out of the gates. We had the Thoughtseize, that got veiled. Voidwalker got bolted, and now we're facing down to Teferi, which is really going to hamper our ability to make any progress here. Bernal not doing that much in his own right, but he doesn't need to at this point. He has all the time in the world.
Yep, big agreed. He is big chilling now, right? Like, if there's no pressure on him, why does he need to do anything? His creativity can get more and more and more Archon just by waiting and getting more fetch lands into play and hanging out. You do see Jack sort of talking to Bernal, saying something, maybe a little banter. You big banter at the table?
Some table talk. I tend to try and match a vibe with my opponent. If they're chatty, I'll be chatty. If they're silent, I'll be silent. You know, I'm not gonna try and chat someone's ear off if I'm just talking to a brick wall. You know.
Sure. Yeah, definitely fair. I try to keep the mood pretty light for the most part, you know. But if my opponent doesn't want that, you know, I don't try and force it on them. I do get my cheeky jokes in. You know, you miss a trigger, I get a little oopsie poopsie on you. Terminates the draw for Jack. That's going to be able to answer an Archon in the future, but right now doesn't answer the Teferi or the lack of pressure that we have against Bernal.
And with Teferi, if Archon's coming down, it's likely to be in Jack's end step if Teferi's plussing, letting creativity effectively become an instance. So by the time we get to terminate that thing, the damage is certainly already done.
Yeah, Bernal is getting, it looks like Bernal was the target from the Ragavan attack, and we're going to see a Leyline Binding on this Ragavan. Just get it out of the way. Thanks to Xander's Lounge being our triumph. It's only a single mana. Doing sort of the hard way there with the old Stomping Ground, Xanders, and Plains, but it does work.
So a motley crew of lands over there in that mana base.
Yeah. Jack, taking a moment here. Looks like a Dothi Voidwalker in hand, considering playing that using the treasure. Will be down the mana. Looks like it's going to hold up for now. Could be a situation of just doesn't want to expose into a main phase creativity there. Has bigger plans for the Dothi.
It's tough too, right? Because if you play it, that's just getting bounced right back with Teferi, and you've wasted your treasure, and where did that really get you? So you might have to just slog through that at some point. You're not dealing with that Teferi otherwise, but yeah, Jack is in a tough spot here.
Jetmir Garden seems to be the fetch from Bernal here. Dom, you've played this match. You've played this scam deck a good bit. How do you feel about this matchup generally from a big macro sense?
It's tougher than I expect it to be, because on paper, right, they're a combo deck, and you can pick their hand apart, and they don't have that much redundancy, so should be easier to do that. They don't have a ton of removal. Their mana base is pretty flimsy, and Blood Moon can really mess them up hard. In practice, though, a lot of times you do one thing and it turns out to be the wrong thing, and they answer it, and then they play a Wrenn and Six that you can't deal with, or they have a Fable, or you strip their hand and then they just top deck the creativity and undo all that hard work. So it's a very swingy matchup. I think in terms of raw percentages, probably pretty close, but easy to feel in the moment when you're playing the games that it's massively lopsided one way or the other.
Seems fair there. And while we were talking, Bernal here, minus on his Leyline Binding, bounces to the hand, put the Ragavan back in play for Jack, and then creativity off a Dwarven Mine to get Archon. That's going to answer the Ragavan. So now Bernal has that Leyline Binding for a future threat and was able to not get hit by the Ragavan, and now has established the Archon of Cruelty. Jack does have a Terminate in hand. Looks like he's pointing to Teferi Time Raveler, sort of joking like my best friend Teferi over here. As Jack's going to have to discard a card, but also going to go up a card. And, even if this Archon doesn't go the distance, it was essentially a 4-for-1, right? We turned our Dwarf into a card. We entered a Ragavan. We got a card, and the Terminate had to hit it, and we went up a card.
Yeah, and the Teferi plus Binding interaction is really nice here. So a lot of the time what you'll see is Binding will hit a token of some kind, like a Fable token, something like that. Then Teferi will bounce the Binding, and then nothing's going to come back, and you just have another Binding effectively ready to go. Or sometimes they play a Ragavan, you Binding it, they play another Ragavan, you can bounce your Binding, they only get to keep one of those legends, and then you can just Binding the other one. So a lot of fun interactions you can set up with that.
100%. As we do see a Terminate coming down on the Archon, we're going to sack our treasure. We're tapped out. It looks to be Fable of the Mirror Breaker for Jack here. All-star in the format, but sort of maybe the beginning of finding the right cards we need to get out of this one.
Yeah, that a nice turn from Jack. Still in the game, managed to double spell. Teferi can clean up the Fable token, but yeah, Bernal has a lot still left in the tank here, and drew a card from Archon, going to draw another one for his draw step, and then from Teferi. So I can probably find something else to put the ball back in Jack's court.
Yeah, and Bernal still has the Leyline Binding we saw, so that could answer the token, then be returned to his hand on a later turn with the Teferi still in play. So Bernal has a lot of play. We joked about, earlier we've been showing a bunch of control matches. The thing about the 5-color creativity deck is it actually gets to play a controlling game in spots like this while still being a combo deck, and that is why it has become one of the most powerful and most popular decks in Modern. Brad Nelson once said combo control is always the best archetype when it is playable. And the 5-color creativity deck looking to make a real name for itself in that department.
Yeah, combo control, one of the most satisfying deck types to play in my experience too, where you throw your jabs here and there and you kind of feint them out, you let them think that they're getting the best of you, and then whatever your combo is just suddenly flips the script on them, go back over the top, and they realize, okay, this is what you were setting up for the entire time, and I was just the mark here. I got played.
Mm-hmm. And now Jack is, speaking of the mark, is going to take up his Fable the Mirror Breaker. Going to take a second, figure out exactly if he wants to discard anything. This looks like a Seasoned Pyromancer in hand. So that's when you can discard to get a little value. Also, you can play it to generate value. So a lot of different action options here for Jack as we are casting Seasoned Pyro.
Yeah, kind of a tough question too for Bernal. Of do you Binding the Fable, stop the rummaging, stop the reflection when it flips, or do you save that for something better? Not sure what the something better would be at this stage, and so I might have been inclined just to hit the Fable.
I agree. Yeah, the only thing I can think of is maybe Blood Moon, and maybe Bernal is just coming with super conservatively. But yeah, I have to agree. I was a little surprised. I thought we were just going to see like, yeah, whatever, get rid of this Fable. My life's good, But we're going to see what comes down here as we did discard another Seasoned Pyromancer, and it looks like a Fury as well. So that's going to be 2 1/1 tokens for Jack here since we didn't discard any lands, and get 2 brand new cards for Jack.
One thing about the creativity deck is you don't really have ways to clean up a board that's going wide. You can bolt one thing, you can binding another thing, but Pyromancer just putting 4 power into play across 3 bodies. You kind of have to deal with each part of that one by one.
Yeah, and with the Fable the Mirror Breaker getting really close to flipping, we can just start activating our Seasoned Pyro every single turn with the Fable, getting more and more cards, getting more and more out of hand. So Bernal does need to find an answer to these cards sooner than later, because it will get out of hand here. And Jack did draw a Feign Death off one of his 2 cards. So if Bernal goes for a bolt on this Seasoned Pyro or the Wait to the Reflection, he might just be completely blown out here. Especially because Jack left up, Swamp in order to cast the Seasoned Pyro. So, Bernal's like, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to obviously, fight this fight.
Feign Death with Reflection is pretty funny too, where you bolt that, you Feign Death it, and then it comes back as a Fable on the front side with, I guess, a +1/+1 counter on it. But then you go through the entire progression of the saga yet again. So you get the 2/2 Goblin, you get the Rummaging, and then finally, 3 turns down the line, you get the Reflection again too.
We saw Bernal here grab a Dwarven Mine. That puts a little dwarf in the way. That is a way to answer one of the 1/1 tokens. Obviously, right now we need to break up this potentially powerful Fable of the Mirror Breaker plus Seasoned Pyromancer combination. But looks like Bernal is going to move to blocks. He's going to take a token down and see if Jack wants to do anything before damage. And Bernal tapping some mana.
What do we got here? So this is
Celestial
Purge.
Purge.
Okay. That gets around Feign Death.
Yeah, it gets around the Feign Death for real, and it's going to make us not have to deal with the Seasoned Pyromancer's flashback ability, even if we didn't fight over it, or the Reflection. I assume Bernal is going for the Seasoned Pyro since Jack's taking a moment to think here, but it might be a situation where we are targeting the Fable. We'll have confirmation in the second when they touch a card.
But worth noting as well, Bernal has 7 lands in play, including 2 black sources, so we are pretty damn close to just hardcasting Archon if we happen to draw that.
Jack is targeting his own Seasoned Pyromancer with the bolt, holding priority. He's going to cast Feign Death. That's going to give Jack 2 new cards. Bernal might have an ability to respond. Looks like Bernal is going to respond. He's going to use the Leyline Binding we knew about, and that will at least turn these 2 cards that are potentially dead into an answer for that binding. So now our Fable gets to stick around.
Yeah, what a turn. So we effectively traded a Feign Death and a Lightning Bolt for the Leyline Binding that we knew about from 4 turns ago.
Yeah, and that Feign Death was pretty weak in the face of Leyline Binding anyway, so this is a great way for him to sort of turn that card off and get through 2 of the premium cards, and still has that Feign Death. So if one of Bernal's Lightning Bolts or Archon of Creativity, Archon of Cruelty triggers happens.
There it is. Oh, big boy coming in.
Bonk! Slam.
Big lad.
Yeah, and Archon discarding the Fury from the hand for Jack here, losing the token, and Bernal gaining 3 life. This is sort of, going the long way around.
Though now, so if Jack has a Fury here and can pitch cast that, then we could play that, copy it with the Fable, clean up the Archon and the tokens, and get a hit in for 6.
Yeah, I think it looks like Jack drew a Dothy Voidwalker, so that will allow him to copy it with Fable and deal 3 damage, or use the Fable copy to pay for the Archon trigger each turn. But Bernal is going to start pulling very far ahead in cards here. Along with damage, just is presenting almost a lethal attack here. Looks like Bernal is deciding, going to attack with both. Important to remember, Dothy Voidwalker can't block because it has the shadow mechanic. This is actually really heads up from Bernal. If Jack makes the token copy, he can't block the Archon. Well, Bernal's also just going to blow out here. But yeah, he couldn't block either way, so he was actually dead by going for this. And Bernal's just like, yeah, I have Binding, you're super duper dead. This is exactly 10 damage. Really well played from Bernal there. Hit a bunch of lands, started flooding out, but like you said, Didn't matter, played a good conservative game and just started slamming Archons in the late game. What a sick match. Or sick game. We still have more match to play. What am I saying?
Yeah, could get even sicker from here.
Yes. Yes. Down bad, as the kids might say. Sick. Tubular. Anyways, we have way more Magic to talk about here, but yeah, that was such a great game. We're gonna have game number 3 here in a second with Jack on the play. Do you think play draw matters a bunch in this matchup, Dom, or is this one where it's important, but maybe not as important as in other matchups?
It really, really matters. So you think about on the play, if you're a scam, your turn on Ragavan can maybe get to connect. On the draw, you play your Ragavan, it gets gobbled up by Wrenn and Six, and you feel like you've lost a game on the spot, effectively. Likewise, you grieve plus Undying Malice or Feign Death. Same thing for Fury, much longer on the play than on the draw. We saw that game, the turn on Thoughtseize got veiled. That's possible on the play, not possible on the draw. So a lot of stuff it just lines up very differently depending on who's on the play. So Scam will be very happy to be on the play here for the decider.
Yeah, you're gonna need it too against someone like Joseph Bernal. Let's maybe pull back up the sideboard real quick here for our scam player. Did we see anything that really sort of changed anything about what's going on in those games? Is there any sort of new cards? Once again, we have the 2 Surgical, the 2 Adetsu, the 2 EE, the 2 Unlicensed, the 2 Ovar, which didn't come up, the 2 up next list, the Brutality, the Brotherhood's End, and the Fatal Push. After seeing that game, Dom, did anything the way Bernal changed make you want to change up what you said before? We're still sort of all in on what you're in on.
Yeah, we didn't see anything too new, I would say. So I imagine just going to resubmit. There might be some cards here which you think are better on the play versus a draw. Maybe you want a little more removal, a little less removal. But for the most part, going to be same formula, just hoping to run it back.
Awesome. Well, let's pull up our Players Championship here, our end of the year thing. If you win one of our big Saturday 10K events like today's, you're going to get a token of yourself. You're going to get a bunch of cash. You're going to invite to our Players Championship, which the prize pool increased by 25% this year. Also, the winner of this tournament cannot be understated. The token is super cool. You also get a Pro Tour invite. So winning one of these things is essentially playing a big PTQ or like a big PPTQ into the PTQ. That is the Players Championship, 16 players, open deck list. Locked in as the reigning champion. The winner today is going to go in that March one. We're going to have April, May, and then some of the summer trials with dates to be announced soon. We're going to have a team event where the whole team will make it. And then we have the annual leaderboard here. And on the annual leaderboard, 6 people who have been doing well consistently throughout the whole year when it comes to points, which you get from playing in our tournaments, are going to get invited to this. So even if you don't spike the tournament, if you just come out and consistently do well, you get a couple top 16s, you get a top 8, maybe, a couple heartbreaking finishes, you can sneak into that annual leaderboard. It happens every single year on these circuits, and it's super exciting. Let's get back to the games, though, as Jack has resolved the mulligan. And Joseph says, before we resolve the game, though, Leyline Sanctity.
I have pre-game effects. I'm going to put Leyline into play. Yes. And so, yeah, even though Jack is on the play, that turn on Thoughtseize, Grief Plus, Feign Death, that is all neutered effectively by, just 0 mana card being put into play before the game even starts.
Yeah, and it looks like Jack
look at this.
Grief. Yeah, and Jack might just be evoking the Grief just to Feign Death it, just to get the 4-3. He's like, listen, my hand's all in on this 4-3 going the distance. And I wish, and pitched the Surgical, by the way. Wished I had it, but, instead I'm just going to go all in and hope you don't have something like Lightning Bolt here. I did not keep a hand that can beat the card Leyline Sanctity, so I'm not going to try to.
Yeah, instead of losing his 2 best cards, Bernal lost 1 card, and it's Leyline, which in other circumstances would not be the card you even care about. So, yeah, working out perfectly here for Bernal. You're seeing why Leyline Sanctity so effective against a scam deck.
Oh,
and Bernal had the Bolt too, which otherwise, without the Leyline, the Bolt would have been seen, probably taken by one of those grief triggers, and would not have had the answer there.
Oh, goodness gracious. So we see Dauthi Voidwalker top deck and slammed here. Now we're getting a draw from Bernal.
Yeah, looks like 1 card left in hand for Jack, so really not much left in the tank.
Yeah, we have Arid Mesa played here. One of the exciting things about this is we get to sort of pass back and forth here and see if Jack can actually get out of this game as Swamp is played.
Voidwalker coming in for 3. Do we have some kind of follow-up here?
I don't know, yeah.
Just nursing that card, it looks like.
Yeah. Looks like we're thinking about it. I think it's Seasoned Pyromancer was the card that was Jack's last card. So obviously the Swamp does not allow us to have that double red. And that could have been a card that can get us back in it, but the game isn't over yet. We can still draw it for turn. Bernal didn't crack the fetch, sort of a sign that maybe he doesn't have the lands he needs.
Yeah, the Scam mana base, you don't have that many lands, and you need to have a decent number of basic swamps. So this is something that can come up. That curve of Voidwalker into Pyromancer is not always trivial to put together.
Yep. As we do see Lightning Bolt on the Dothi Voidwalker, that bolt is going to get exiled due to how things work with Dothi and state-based actions.
Mm-hmm. Notably, Bernal bolting, excuse me, there we go, the Voidwalker on the upkeep, because if Jack has the Feign Death effect, something like that, you want it to come into play tapped and not be able to attack on this turn cycle. So heads up sequencing there from Bernal. Going to follow up now with Wrenn and Six, getting back to fetch lands. So really everything going Bernal's way in this game.
Yeah, as we do see, we pick up the Wooded Foothills here, and Wrenn and Six, sort of these all-star and these grindy games, just guarantees you get to play out the whole game the way you want, and then also provides you with a win condition now. So Bernal, would like to creativity and all that sort of jazz, but if Jack can't answer the Wrenn, he doesn't need to do anything else. He'll just win via bolts.
So Jack's sideboard cards coming through in one sense, he apparently has at least one, and it looks like both of his Orvars in hand. So if Bernal thinks the coast is clear, goes for creativity, you might see both those Orvars coming to play, copying Archon, except that's going to be neutered in turn because those Archon triggers target, and so under a Leyline of Sanctity, those can't go in the stack, those can't happen. So you got your 6/6s, but that's all you've got. You don't get to get this barrage of triggers back in the other direction.
100%. As we do see a Dwarven Mine enter here, getting us a little dwarf beatdown. It's got to respect the beatdowns with the old dwarf tokens. It does look like Bernal. Yeah, it's the second. Now it's 2x2, just like no on the arc there, Dom. As we do see a cutting of the deck.
Now, my understanding is the arc contained 2 of every creature, so that's a lot of different tokens that we gotta wrangle here. Got to get on that real quick if we want to do that before the flood season comes.
Well, speaking of that, we have 2 creatures targeted with creativity here. That means we're going to get 2 Archons because Bernal's deck only has Archon as the thing to hit. And so that's going to be backbreaking. Even if Jack has an answer here, you're going to discard 2 cards. Bernal's going to draw 2 cards. You're going to take 6. Bernal's going to gain 6. So we're going to see the life total swap here. And it looks like Jack does have an answer for one of the Archons before the trigger resolves and he loses the card from his hand. And it looks like it's Ovar the All-Formed. Very important to sequence that one as the second Archon discard. If you can afford to, that way it's 6 in play.
We see the fingers pointing to the Leyline, figuring out how that interaction works. If it weren't for that Leyline, Bernal casting that creativity for 2, this massive over-the-top endgame play, he would lose this game on the spot because both those Orvars would throw those Archon triggers back in his face. As it stands, Leyline just going to blank that, and Jack is going to be in a decent spot.
Yeah, as we do see, Bernal's taking a second to read Orvar. So Jack, I believe, probably sacked this as his second trigger, so he'll at least get to keep the 6/6 if he did do it. If not, the second Archon trigger will answer the Orvar, as long as the last card from Jack's hand. But yeah, you're right. Leyline Sanctity coming in clutch not only is just answering these, turn 1 double grief that could have been game ending, but this game ending Orvar. Sanctity is looking like a card you bring in more and more.
Oh, so interesting wrinkle here. So when you discard Orvar, you can copy any permanent that's on the battlefield. And so if you copy the Leyline, then you shut off. Yeah.
Super heads up. Yeah, I never seen it come. Yeah, Jack with the heads up play there. Great catch from Jack. That is the sort of stuff that makes or breaks your tournaments, right, Dom? Figuring out these little weird lines that come up. That is how you succeed at the highest level, as we do see this Fable the Mirror Breaker, and explains why he discarded it first. He wanted to grab the Leyline of Sanctity so he didn't have to discard the other card.
Now, it turns out there's still a pair of 6/6 flyers that have got to be dealt with here, but a nice little play to showcase on camera there.
Yes, indeed. And it looks like Jackson concede.
After a real hilarious final turn cycle, Bernal creativity for 2, still going to close out this game anyway. Bernal, one of the most decorated players in our tournament here, going to move up to 3-0. Still a long day of Magic ahead, but maybe the top 8 starting to get inside here. Or at least a nice
Yeah,
chunk of points.
yeah, Bernal is someone who plays all the events, got very close, I believe, last year. So got very in early on last year and just played a little bit for fun, but also someone who's, I think, played in almost all of the NRG Champ series. So he is someone who's going to grind these events, even if he was dead for top 8. Obviously, not very skillfully at 3-0. We're going to actually jump down to our backup feature match, which I believe is Oliver Tomiko, the SCG Players Championship, the last one, the last year. And we have against Mason Fang. Mason on Burn and Oliver on Rhinos. So let's see how this one sort of goes.
Now, young Oliver likes to chat, likes to brag a little, likes to throw down on Twitter. Oliver was saying, I broke Modern. I did it. I'm going to unleash my broken deck at the NRG, going to win the whole thing, going to be easy. And then he had this real existential crisis over the course of the week. My deck isn't broken anymore. Don't know what I'm doing. It's all falling apart. And now shows up just registering stock net decked Team Rhinos instead. You hate to see it, Mason.
Well, you do hate to see it, but at least there's a little bit of spice going on here for Oliver. It does have Murktide in the main deck, so sort of a newer thing for Rhinos. So if you haven't been keeping up with Modern, that might be something that throws you for a loop there. But yeah, Oliver's, like you mentioned, someone who sort of likes to play the heel role, to do some wrestling references. So definitely sort of going hard there on Twitter, reminding people like, hey, I was the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dragon Duels world champion. I can hang with the best of them in card games. I'm doing the same thing here. So we're going to see what Mason's doing as, this is a time-shifted match, so it's going to be playing a little bit quicker. And it's Burn anyway, so it's going to be going even quicker then.
I remember back in the SEG days, I said on Twitter that Oliver is a heel, and that's a good thing. Every tour needs its heel. And young Oliver, even younger at the time, asked, what's a heel? And the lad has come so far. Now he knows what it is, and he has fully embraced the role. If he top 8 this tournament and looking good so far, we'll see if he can reprise that.
We will definitely hear about it if he does, not only from the booth, but everywhere in between. As the double Goblin Guy attacked, we did hit a Mr. Rainforest, and then we had a Crashing Footfall on top. All of us going to take a second to go and fetch the the Catcher Triumph here, and be ready to go on that one. As we do also get, the draw for the turn, as Mason here has the early creatures, which are really strong, as long as something like Fury doesn't completely blow them out.
Yeah, so a fast start here for Mason on the play. Double Goblin Guide, Bolt now putting Oliver down to 10. Quickly getting towards single digits, and it's only the third turn here.
Yeah, and this is like the reason you play Burn, right? Like when your creatures connect and they stick on the board for more than a turn, this is such strong burn repetitive cycles that even if Oliver does what his deck's trying to do, as we do reveal Wooded Foothills here, and then the Gemstone Cavern, we're drawing all the lands here. We have so many cards for Oliver. It is still sometimes just not enough because you have to fade so many turns of not getting bolted out here. As it looks like Oliver is going to fetch up an island and maybe interact with one of these Goblin Guides. It looks like we're actually going to forgo the island and maybe pick up the forest instead.
Yeah, I would assume a basic of some kind. Don't want to take any more damage on top of the many damage you're taking already this turn in the game here. So looks like we have a Fire Ice lined up for one Goblin Guide, but down to 7, and that's in range of any combination of burn spells really, or Boros Charm in particular. That one often deals exactly to the final 4. So we'll see what Mason has left in the tank.
Yeah, Oliver casting Fire Ice, blowing up the Goblin Guide, and saving 2 lives, so down to 7. Boros Charm plus Bolt would be lethal here, but Mason not casting it on Oliver's turn, might be respecting the card Force Negation, might also not have it, not sure what he has in hand, but probably is going to have some burn spells, as we do see Oliver just play Gemstone Cavern and cast Shardless Agent. That's going to find Crashing Footfalls. We see Oliver actually has a main deck Mystical Dispute, a little bit of tech there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those Goblin Guys and any future creatures, they've done their job. They are now just cheering on from the sidelines as Mason hopes to stitch together enough burn spells to finish the job here.
Yeah, Oliver is tapped out now. We have the Rhinos in play and can't use Force Negation. So if Mason has a card like Boros Charm here, this is the key card to do it. And Mason's now seeing there's main deck Mystical Disputes. Doesn't know how many, but that's a card that could be a problem. So using it, getting in your damage now while you can is pretty pristine. It looks like Mason grabbing a tap Sacred Foundry, so maybe doesn't have use for all the mana, but does at least have Boros Charm. Doesn't put Oliver down to 3. Mason, every draw that isn't like Eidolon is very good.
And now basically anything is lethal from this position. Any spell is gonna get it done.
Yeah, looks like Mason's talking to a judge, maybe asking a question real quick about the Oracle text on a card. Oliver, just big chilling. 7 cards in hand. A lot of them are lands because, the Goblin Guides were bountiful in their rewards. Looks like maybe they were asking a question before and they hadn't finished shuffling or whatever. Unclear, but whatever. It will be taken care of. All right, and it looks like we're gonna get a cut. Fate's in Oliver's hand here, and will Mason go for it now if he has it? Maybe his multiple burn spells can play through a force negation. Has a fiery islet, so that's a redraw.
Yeah, those canopy lands, massive pickups to the bone deck, where a lot of times you get into a spot where any land, useless, any spell, wins you the game, and a land can be a redraw for that spell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Oliver, he cheated death on this turn, gets to untap at 3, gets to put a big attack in with at least 1 Rhino, maybe 2.
Yeah, I was gonna say it gets a little awkward, right? Because these Monastery Swiftspear and Goblin Guides aren't very good now, but when your life total is so low, you might actually have issues attacking with the full force like you'd normally like to.
Yeah, I think the crucial realization here is those creatures are attacking for only 2, and so you can take a hit for 2, you can go down to 1, and you really need to win the game with an attack over 2 turns. Getting both runners in lets you do that.
Yeah, Mason takes a draw step here. Like you mentioned, can be afforded to hit by one of these Goblin Guides. Here's another Goblin Guide, though. That is going to force lethal. If Tomiko doesn't have something, Tomiko's top deck's a Crashing Footfall, so he knows there's nothing, no lands there or anything, no extra information. Decks like this normally play something like Brazen Bar or Prismari Command. These are pretty stock cards to have. We did see Oliver had a Mystical Dispute, so maybe that's where some of the cards went, but looks like Oliver's taking a moment just to make sure that he's going to sequence his plays correctly. You don't become the world champion or an SCG player champ in this game without playing tight technical magic. Looks like he's going to eat the Swift Spear, realizing I just can't beat spells, and have a Fire Ice for the Goblin Guide.
Yeah, so potentially surviving this turn at 1 and attacking back for lethal, winning on the tightest of margins possible.
Yeah. Life totals are not going to be able to update it for y'all. This is a time shifted match, so it sort of happened in the moment. We can't do anything. And yeah, it looks like Oliver wins that game with the attack back. Crazy game there from Mason and Oliver. Mason did such a good job again, the sort of winning position. And for credit. Let's quickly pull up the deck list here. Let's see what's going on here. We saw Oliver had Mystical Dispute in the main deck. So that's a pretty unique thing. We're going to start here with Mason, though. Mason playing a pretty stock burn deck. Not going to read off the whole sideboard here because of time, but Dom, are there any cards besides the Rolling Vortex that really jump out to you?
Just the Rolling Vortex, and those are good. Those punish you for playing a spell without paying any mana. You get Nug for 5 if that happens, and the whole gimmick of the Cascade decks is you're playing your Cascade spell or your Suspend spell off Cascade for free. So going to shut that off, and then also the Cascade decks get to play a bunch of these free spells like Fury, Force Negation, and so on. So every time you do that, Vortex is going to punish you. So yeah, that card is phenomenal. Those are definitely coming in. And then I imagine we're going to look at stuff like Searing Blaze as a conditional burn spell that might come out, but not too much tinkering around the edges there.
All right, let's look at Oliver's. These Rhino decks often shove their sideboards full of 4 and 3-ups because there isn't much room due to the Cascade thing. So Oliver has 4 Endurance, 4 Force of Vigor, 3 Blood Moon, 2 Fury, a Gemstone, and only 1 Mystical Dispute because as you'll see in the main deck, we have 3 Murktide and 3 Mystical Dispute. Dom, what do you want to do in the sideboard here?
So I want that Gemstone Caverns, as I do every time I'm on the draw, and then I want the Furies just to clean up some of those early creatures. Beyond that, there's not a ton. You might actually want Mystical Dispute just to, pay 3 mana, Cano Borstrom or something in the mid game. Like you'll do whatever you have to do to avoid taking additional damage. But I'm not a sideboard that really came prepared for burn. I think the matchup is close enough, maybe positive enough for Rhinos as it is. You don't need to do that necessarily. But yeah, I think this deck will be mostly the same as well.
Awesome. Let's get down to the future match area and see what's going on.
There is a case, I suppose, for Endurance, just as a creature that doesn't get bolted or blazed or anything like that, and then can also chew up a Goblin Guide or something in combat.
Yeah, maybe get your attack on a little bit. Looks like both players did mulligan. As Mason goes Sunbake Canyon into something. It looks like we're suspending a Rift Bolt.
And Tonemon Canyon, a sign that maybe a landlight hand for Mason, you don't really be taking unnecessary damage off that thing if you can avoid it.
Yeah, we are going to see the Rift Bolt just hit Tomiko in the face down to 17. As we are going to see, looks like a Skewer the Critics being cast due to the spectacle cost of Tomiko taking damage. And Mason maybe kept a one lander on a mulligan with a bunch of burn spells. Oliver down to 13 after the fetch, but no real recursive damage from creatures. He is in a much better sort of spot than last game.
Yeah, and Oliver has to love to see that.
Yeah. Oliver taking a second to sort of think about what he wants to play.
It's tough as the burn there because you really don't want to mulligan if you can avoid it. You care a lot about the quantity of cards you have and not just the quality. So mulligan 6, very punishing. At the same time, keeping a 7 that just doesn't get to do anything is not going to get you there either. And now you see Oliver using Ice out of Fire Ice as Time Walk effectively, taking Mason's one land out of commission for the entire turn.
Nice. Yeah, Mason top decked a Mountain Dust, so can cast this Lava Spike. We know Mason doesn't have any creatures still that could be played because it would have been played earlier if they're 1 mana. And so Oliver should be down, I believe, to 10 life. Once again, we cannot fix the time-shifted match life totals. Those are things that happen in the thing. There we go. Now they're down to 10. And we're going to Shardless Agent into the Rhinos. And Dom, we've got that pressure that we need to win now.
Yeah, that's 10 power in play on turn 3. And that's a 2-turn clock for Mason, who unclear how many cards he has left over. There looks like 3 in hand, but unless those are all one mana, 3 damage burn spells, going to be hard to counter 10 here.
Agreed. As we do see Dom sort of puts it down there and has to pass the turn back. Mason needs to find a flurry of burn spells. Looks like Mason is sort of tanking a little bit. Maybe has a situation of having Eidolon or something like that. Let's see. Just gonna cast Deflecting Palm. And then we're going to see Mystical Dispute. Mason is going to fall down to 17 from the pain, take 10 down to 7. And Mason, I don't think can actually win given the amount of mana he has and the pressure on board, at least this turn. He's going to have to answer those Rhinos somehow.
Mason, we all have to find someone who loves us the way that burn players love boarding in Deflecting Palm. They just can't quit it. Even if it's not a healthy relationship, they come back every single time.
Yeah, and we are going to see Mason here get 2-0'd by Oliver Tomiko. So Oliver moving on to 3-0. Congratulations, Oliver. I'm sure we're going to be seeing more of him as this weekend plays on. As for us, you're going to see more of us now because we're about to be having more Magic here in a second, but we're going to take a quick break. So make sure to go get some water, and we'll be back here in just 2 minutes.